to my standing, girlfriends of the written word. We are back to Wheel of Time. Without further ado, I will be talking about the sixth book, Lord of Chaos, first 5 chapters plus the prologue. Usually I would of course cover 10 by 10 roughly, but this prologue is very meaty, so let's go, shall we? So at the beginning we start in the prologue and we have POV of Demandred. He steps through a gateway and he appears to be in Sheol. And around him there are all kinds of, evil stuff being done, Myrddraal, swords being forged, and a very oversized Myrddraal approaches him, introduces himself as Shaidar Haran, and takes him to see the Dark One. Then the Dark One then demands information on the current events in the world, and Demandred then reports that yes, Ravin is dead. There are fewer and fewer Forsaken now in the world, but Dark One appears to know already all that, and he just wants to kind of warn Demandred and kind of enforce discipline that there is only one fate that will happen to traitors. And the Dark One also offers to make Demandred a nameless, which makes him really happy. He's like in tears, he's ecstatic. And that's that as far as Demandred. Then we shift to Nynaeve, and Nynaeve is, experimenting, if we can call it that. She is examining Siwan and Liane because she hopes to reverse or somehow remedy the stilling. She's trying to find a way to heal them. Usually Nynaeve, of course, cannot use her power unless she is distraught, unless she's angry. But thanks to Adam, because she has, well, I wouldn't say enslaved Moghedien, but I guess she did, in a way. She's controlling Moghedien through the Damane bracelet, and she's trying to find a way to reverse engineer this technique and maybe somehow find a substitute for distilling, if not a complete reversal of it. Then Elaine barges in like she owns the place with no shame, doesn't even know. And she is angry because there's an envoy being sent to Rand, to Caemlyn, and she is not on the list. She's not allowed to go. Then Siwan reveals that 9 Aes Sedai are being sent as an envoy to Rand, and also they discuss the possibility of Elaine's mother being dead, the queen, but there are no rumors that would confirm that she's alive, so the prevailing public opinion is that she has perished. Then she and Min have a sort of I wouldn't say an argument, kind of an update on their conversation, in which they all agree that yes, they can share Rand. But that's more to the point. The kind of main subject of discussion is whether should they turn over Moghedien to Aes Sedai, because knowing who she is and knowing what she has done in the past, the only road for her is to be tried and punished, executed. On the other hand, she is this wealth of knowledge because she lived so long. She's one of the few people who actually knows how Age of Legends looked like because she lived it. And they also are trying to get the information out of her about the weather, because the weather everywhere is very unnatural, and there is a heat that's rising, temperature is rising across the land, and the actual weather cycle, I suppose, on the planet is off balance. And the Moghedien, of course, says that weather is not my thing. Why are you questioning me? It's the Dark One's doing. I have nothing to do with this. And then we switch back to Fail, to Two Rivers, and this time we are not following the Two Rivers plotline through Perrin's eyes, rather through her eyes, and she's holding court because she is the Lord's wife, of course, and Perrin is dodging his duties of ruling and making decisions for his people. So she is in charge of those things. And Two Rivers is kind of now a new burgeoning, I guess, trade center, if we can call it that. A lot of refugees are pouring into Two Rivers from Mountains of Mist, from Terabond, from Almoth Plain, and it's changing. And one of the interesting things that happens is amidst all of these petitioners who come to Fail's court, there are wisdoms who approach her and they're not asking anything except for guidance, because they are concerned about the weather. Because even back in the first book, Eye of the World, we know that the first thing we learn about wisdoms is that their number one function, besides healing, is predicting weather, because it really helps with the crops and agriculture. And wisdoms are distressed because they cannot sleep, they cannot eat, because they don't understand weather, they cannot predict the flow. It's unnatural, it's different somehow. Then Fails has a conversation with Perrin that she lectures him about how he needs to be more lordly, and he, on the other hand, is determined to go to Rand because the whole Taviran feeling is tingling again, and he senses that Rand needs him, so he needs to go. And but Fail, of course, being who she is, will not allow him to just quietly slip away, because even though he did talk about to anyone about his departure, but he did have a conversation with her, even though she is the last one to find out. So she insists about coming with him, and insists about having an escort, because, well, we all know how Perrin is. He would just go away on his own with his axe, and that's it. Next, we have Kevin. Kevin is kind of in charge of training the recruits, I suppose, and he is overseeing the meeting that will undergo between Aes Sedai and Wise Ones from Shaido clan. And Gavin's troops are going to Karen to request Rand to come back to Tarvalon. then a peddler, a traveler, comes along and asks Gavin for news, and well, it ends up badly, because the rumor comes out that apparently Rand had fingers in his hand in Queen Morghez's death, and which sets off Gavin on the road of revenge, I guess, something along those lines. He intends to kill Rand. He wants to kill Rand. That's that. Then we have the Aiel. So Savannah tribe and Shaido have a treaty, and then there's this whole scheming by Catelyn, because Savannah wants to see Rand when he's captured, and then Catelyn wonders if Shaido can be used against Gavin and his troops, because he doesn't like how independent they are, and there are a lot of back scheming with Red Aja and Black Aja, not to go overboard with that. Then we're back to Morgheze. Well, back to, but this is the first time we've seen her after a while. So she has a meeting with Aileron. Is that how you pronounce his name? Aileron. He's the king of Amadisia, and she has an audience with him, and she is looking for aid because she wants to naturally regain her throne from Gabriel, the usurper, and doesn't go as good as well as she is planning. And her counselor Telenvor, he suggests that that they should have gone to Gildan, and he thinks that they would have had better results there. And Morgheze, of course, snarks off at him. You know your place and all that, but he is right. Even though there is this big difference between their stations and positions, Morgheze is kind of a queen in exile, and everyone thinks she's dead. So, yeah, that's about that with Morgheze. Then we have Pedro Nia. He enters the scene. At least, unlike Elaine, he knocks. And he tells Queen Morgheze that she will not receive the aid she seeks here, but Children of Light might help her. And he also gives her an information, which I guess is a sort of a motivation for her, that Rand is the one who is a false dragon, and that Aes Sedai are actually behind all of this. This is a huge conspiracy. He's not even a channeler. They do his channeling, and he has killed Gabriel, and he has occupied Camelin himself. So that's that. Then we're back to Rand. Rand practices the sword against 5 people at once, and gets through 4 of them. I think one actually manages to touch him or something. Then he has this line that's very kind of showing about his state of mind, about his paranoia, I guess. But then again, I always like this quote, which is, I don't know if there's a single originator, a single author of this quote, and this has nothing to do with Wheel of Time, but I guess it can be applied to Rand's quote. But the saying goes, if you're not paranoid, you're just not paying enough attention. And Rand says something similar when one of the guys in the court, when Rand defeats 4 people and manages to be kind of touched by one of them, and he finds out that it might have been staged. He says that I can always count on my enemies not to work together. And that kind of a window, a glimpse into Rand's mind and his psyche and his mentality, that no matter what, he is always thinking ahead, or tries to think ahead, or overthinks the situation. And Rand still hears echoes of Lewis Terran in his head, but I guess it's under control somewhat, but that's about it. We then have a brief moment with Matt, and of course the exchange about Matt's skills as a commander. Where did he learn? Well, actually I think Bashir, Bashir asks Matt about the origin of his amazing leadership skills, and Matt fumbles from the conversation as always. He's just like, yeah, you know, I read a book or two, things like that. Then Rand is voicing his theory that since the tower has split, and this is now a known information, it's out, it's no longer this rumor thing. We do know that there was a split in the tower, and he thinks that there are a number of Aes Sedai who would potentially be on his side, would support him if given the chance. And he wants to, of course, typical of Rand, he wants to use them because he's convinced that they will try to use him, so, you know. And then we find out that Mazrim Taim has arrived. And Bashir says that, and this is important, that he respects that Rand has made a decision about male channelers, but if Taim goes to Saldaea, he will be unprotected. So Taim arrives, he has sort of a, I wouldn't say conflict, words are exchanged between him and Bashir, and then he sort of, after much posturing, submits himself to Rand and Rand's rule, because Rand, well, threatens Taim that you do not threaten my man Bashir here, or you will be, you know, offed. So Rand comes to a realization that he does not like Taim at all and has his doubts about his sanity, but he is aware that he is useful, so he tries to do that. He takes him in his service, such as he is. And then Rand takes Taim and goes to the farm with him. And why I'm using air marks? Because the farm is essentially a Randall Thor's magical school for reformed male channelers who are not insane, trademark. So they go to the Randall Thor's magical school for gifted channelers, and it is what it is. So it's a place to rehabilitate, quote unquote, male generals and trade them for the final battle. And he assigns Stain to be headmaster, if one can call him that. Also, I mentioned that Lewis Theron's voice is kind of under control now. What I mean is, Rand no longer has any illusions about whose voice, internal voice it is when it appears. He now knows the difference. Oh, this was thought by Lewis Theron and not mine. Doesn't mean that Lewis Theron is quiet. He tries to overtake Rand, and he wants for Rand to go on a homicidal spree every now and then. But yeah, that's that. So, what then happens next? Well, he goes back to the camp. He sees two nations that are met there, Karen and Tyron, kind of glaring at each other, being quiet, trying to ignore each other. And two of them, as much as they dislike each other, ignore the Aiel. And there are jokes and Aiel humor, dry Aiel humor, haha. You get it because water is scarce and all that. He holds a war council, and first he talks to nobles, they leave, then he talks to chiefs, and there are suggestions about what they should do next, how should they move. And he returns to his tent then, and basically the point of this meeting is to discuss the rebellion and how it has grown and what should they do next. Then we are back to Matt, finally, where three guys, so Nalessin, whatever you pronounce his name, Dalmanes, and Dayrit, try to cause some mischief with Matt, and well, Matt, he does not need to start mischief. Mischief finds him. These three guys, they want to win against Matt, and they choose horse race, and that's a really fun bit, actually. I think it's chapter 5. That's a really, really fun part. Then Matt, of course, tries to impress a girl and fails miserably. And him and his man sing a bunch of songs and all discussing how shaggy the soldier's life is. And he comes across two hunters who kind of harass a boy called Oliver, and he beats them and kind of gets him out of town. And he learns about this boy, how his family is dead, so he decides to, I guess, adopt him. Well, I guess that's it. His band then moves towards south, and he wants to trade them. He wants them to be able to travel as fast as the Aiel, or almost as fast as the Aiel. And that's that for the first 5 chapters, plus the prologue. Now, what's next?
5 questions. 3 questions. 3 questions.
Questions. My first question is, and my memory is foggy, but I don't think this is the first instance of nay bliss being uttered. So I understand this is an increase in stature, in rank, but is it an increase in power as well? I guess I'm kind of confused. There's talk about Dark One being in the boar, and the boar is still holding him, but the prison inside is no longer small. There's still a barrier between him and the world. How does he exercise his power upon his servants? Does he only exercise his will, and his servants are powerful, therefore they exercise power onto themselves and others? Or is he able to somehow, boost the power of his servants? I'm unsure. Anyway, next question. So this is also maybe due to my hazy memory, but Murdrell introduces himself as Shaidar Haran, and he is taller, more imposing looking than the average Murdrell. Is he the first Murdrell, first instance of a named Murdrell that we know of? Do they name themselves? How does that work? I don't remember named Murdrells. It's always a half-man or a Murdrell. But yeah, interesting. And this one seems to have more of a personality, because most of them are like walking trees as far as the personality goes. They're not stoic like, I don't know, like our favorite warder is. They're just empty shells of evil. Okay, next question. And this has to do with this question that I asked previously. So, okay, I don't know how Dark One interacts power-wise with his servants, even in Sheol. But how does he perceive the world outside the boar? Does he rely on eyes and ears, seeing through eyes and ears of his servants? Or does he actually have some kind of senses that go through the boar so that he can perceive the world as it is? Because I'm under the impression that he cannot. He gets all of his information willingly or unwillingly through his servants. And that's next best thing. So if you can see through the eyes of the many, it's like you have 1,000 of cameras running around the world. But that's beside the point. These are questions. Let's go with what I liked. I liked a lot of stuff. So, first thing, Balefire. I mentioned this in previous reviews, but it's a huge thing narratively. Usually what I consider to be a huge thing narratively is when a thing has large consequences, and Balefire is very much a thing that has large consequences. They are more than a question of life and death, they are existential in nature. It's the fabric of reality. So during the War of Power, we learn through conversation in Sheol that the entire cities vanished from Balefire. The consequences of that have to be gigantic. I mean, the reality almost collapsed into itself, if I understood it correctly. When one being is deleted from the pattern, that's inconceivable, that's why it's forbidden. Imagine an entire city being deleted from the fabric of reality. It just boggles my mind. Just think about it. Second thing that I liked, the farm. It's a brilliant code name for the School of Main Channelers. Actually, Major props to Robert Jordan for surprising me, because I should have expected that, but I did not expect that. A formation of proto-mini Tar Valon for men, I did not expect that. It makes so much sense, because at the end of the last book, Rand gives amnesty for all male channelers, and he wants to put a stop to persecution of male channelers, because he wants more men fighting on his side against the Dark One. But it makes so much sense to actually train them. So I will not call it the farm, though. That's Randall Thor's magical school for gifted channelers. That's what it is. So yeah, the next thing that I really liked is experimentation with the bracelet, when Nynaeve is trying to reverse engineer distilling. It didn't read like a typical fantasy scene of wizards standing and doing alchemy stuff. It actually felt quasi-scientific the way it was written. It was different than typical fantasy scenes, because usually fantasy doesn't concern itself with such things. It's like, oh, we have a spell or we have a MacGuffin, which MacGuffins, Wheel of Time is full of them. But my point is, usually writers do not go into these naturalistic details. So we have a problem, what do? We try to understand it, and then we try to solve it. It's a very scientific way of thinking. Science doesn't have to be laboratory and all things we perceive as modern science. It's just a way of thinking. It's the reason why we have scientific method is just trial and error, right? And that read like that. Also, this is a kind of a throwaway line, but it made me think, and it's also something that I've been taking for granted. So Siwan reveals that the requirement of 13 Aes Sedai to still a male channeler is not actually something that's written in stone. She suspects it's more like a custom than a requirement, which makes sense. You would think that since a lot of the conversation about one power and who is more powerful than whom, you would think that when you have people who is Randall Thor, who is more powerful than a group of Aes Sedai, doesn't really matter the number of them. What matters is how powerful they are. So it can be 5, it can be 55. It can be 55 average in power Aes Sedai who are equivalent or stronger than Randall Thor in order to overpower him. Or it can be 13 who do not stand a chance against him. It's just a food for thought. It's something to think about. Also, this might sound like faint praise, but for all her faults, Faile does know how to run a court. She introduces also techniques to improve the quality of life there, like irrigation, which is something new to Two Rivers. With modern eyes, the quote I'm about to read might sound classist. I don't see it as such. Well, I see it as, consider this. This is a display of a principle that still works today. It's a principle of who is being governed versus who is governing someone. So people come to her for advice on how to handle stuff. People who are below her in stature. And these days we would have elected representatives who would we turn to solve our problems. Like, I don't know, fires are happening. Dear authorities, deal with it. You have been selected, we come to you for solutions. So this way also works in Wheel of Time. So the quote is, "These women might not have known what they were doing, but they had come to the right place. Part of the contract between noble and commoner, ingrained in Fail from birth, was to remind that people that evil times were not forever. If not today was bad, then tomorrow would be better, and if not tomorrow, then the day after." It just shows how important ingrained a need to lead or to follow is. My next point that I liked, and it's also has to do with two rivers. This is a fantasy trope that I like a lot, which is also a very naturalistic approach to changing circumstances. Fantasy likes to keep status quo in its world building. It likes to keep its technology level in stone. It likes to maintain the status quo. And here it's a minor thing, but so a battle happens, and a village that used to be just a village becomes a center, a cultural center, new cultural center, center of commerce, due to the inflow of refugees, craftsmen, different cultures, different ideas. It's all melding, and it's all changing. As much as it changes people who are from different cultures and come to Two Rivers, it changes Two Rivers. For good or for worse, I would say largely for good, because it introduces new technology, new ideas. It enriches the Two River folk. Props to Robert Jordan, what can I say? Now let's move to things I did not like. Just a few things, but I do need to tell them, right? I do like to repeat myself on this show, but I've ranted about prologues in the past, but I wouldn't be me without mentioning it again, wouldn't I? A prologue on itself, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it from writing point, but at this point, especially on book 6, this is a chapter 1 in all but name. I don't feel like it's written differently from the rest of the book, because it has a ridiculous amount of point of views, different point of views. And I prefer my prologues to be more impactful. A single scene, even if it's cryptic. It's like a puzzle you're trying to solve through entire of the book, or even the whole series. And here, there's nothing that's really meant to show foreshadowing, except for maybe the Mordred in the beginning. But even then, that's quite... There's nothing cryptic about it. It's a very front-loaded prologue, and I fail to see the point in having one if you're just going to write a gigantic chapter. Again, not a badly written chapter, but it's not exactly serves the point of a prologue. Moving on. This is another complaint that I have, but at this point I think this is a quirk of Jordan's writing. I don't think it will go away. It's just a writing trait, a writing tick maybe, if writers have ticks, which I think they do. A lot of people mention braid tugging and smoothing of skirts, and I don't mind that. I actually find this charming. What I notice is Jordan's constant reiteration of characters' backgrounds and standing. What I mean is How many times do we have to hear that Elaine is the strongest accepted they had in 1,000 years, or that she's the daughter heir, and things like that, right? From different characters. Who is it aimed towards, this reiteration? I can see a value in reiterating some of the plot points, especially in between books. I mean, these are ginormous books. And as time went on, especially for people who were fans, old school fans of Wheel of Time, time between releases has increased. So the wait between books became longer with time, with each new book. So a mini recap would actually come in handy. But this has nothing to do with plot. Yes, we know that Elaine is strong and she also is daughter heir. Yes, we know that Rand is no longer a farmhand, and you get what I'm saying, right? I don't think it's necessary. I just think it kind of could have been edited down. But it's not like it ruins anything. It's just I kind of roll my eyes when I see those lines, to be honest. Let's move on to predictions.
Well, it's only a guess, but it's all I have to go on.
I don't have much predictions because this is a giant book, and I've read only 5 chapters plus prologue, and in these 5 chapters, from them, I don't think I have enough information to make an educated guess. So maybe this is not a prediction, more of a hopeful proclamation about Mazrim Taim. I really hope Taim does not become explicitly evil in the future. I'm not saying I want him to stay on Rand's side. I'm saying that I like the idea of having a rehabilitated male channeler existing. He doesn't even have to be on Rand's side. He can be antagonistic towards Rand. I just think it would be more interesting if he was not on the side of the Shadow, but instead a member of his own faction or joining strength with someone else. So he is someone who is overly ambitious. So I predict that he'll become overly ambitious, seek out new alliances. Maybe he still, I'm pretty sure he does, resent the fact that he is the false dragon, and he, even though he's not the real Dragon Reborn, he wishes to be on Rand's position, and so on and so forth. So that would be it for today. I would like to thank Ethan for his continued Patreon support. I'm grateful for any support, even if it's in form of likes, subscribes, views, Patreon, whatever, no pressure. I'm doing this because I like doing this. I do not want to treat this as a job. Otherwise, I think my enthusiasm would suffer. And if there's one thing in my life that I don't want to feel like a job, it's books. So thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Have a nice work week, or a weekend if you're watching it at a weekend. Bye-bye.